Hello, reading, writing to friends. I'm glad to have you back. We are heading into the home stretch here. This is our week 30, so next week is our very last video. Can you believe it? And so we're going to get started this week on our writing, just like usual. And the last couple of weeks we have spent improving our first paragraph in a little essay. Okay, now you have written 5 paragraph essays, and up until now your first sentence has just been one sentence. Your first paragraph has just been one sentence. It's been the topic sentence, and then the last couple of weeks we have figured out how to make the first paragraph a little more interesting. We've added a topic sentence, the regular one that we've always done, and then we've had another sentence that is similar to a kind of a summary sentence, and then we've add our feeling sentence afterwards. So there's actually 3 sentences in the first paragraph. All right, and then in the other paragraphs on your first 3 squares, you have your subtopic and then 3 details for each subtopic. All right, so now we have our 4 paragraphs all worked out really well. Our last paragraph, we have usually done just one sentence, just like in our first paragraph, but it's been a summary sentence, and it's kind of summarized everything that was in all the other 3 boxes, and that is good. That's a good way to end an essay, but we're going to add a little bit more, but it's almost exactly the same thing as we did for our first paragraph. You have a piece of paper in your packet that looks like this. If I can get it out, it looks like this. All right, we are going to work on this right here. This one is for next week, so keep this handy because you'll need it both this week and next week. Now, if you read that 4th paragraph right there, it really is actually, it's really actually a pretty good summary sentence. And you can tell just by reading the summary sentence really what the rest of it is about. It says, my favorite dessert is pie a la mode because I like the crust, the filling, and the ice cream. Well, first of all, do you know what pie a la mode is? All it is pie with ice cream on top of it. All right, so this person's favorite dessert is pie a la mode, and you can tell by the summary sentence what the other 3 boxes are about. It tells the 3 reasons that that this is his or her favorite dessert. We know that the first box probably says something about the crust, and the second box probably says something about the filling and has 3 details about the filling, and then the third one probably has something to do with the ice cream, and it would have 3 details about the ice cream. All right, so that's a really good summary statement because it truly can tell. You can read that last paragraph and know pretty much what the rest of the writing is about, can't you? Okay, so we don't have to add a whole lot to that last sentence. What we're going to add is similar to, we're going to add something to the beginning and something to the end. All right, you've had practice with transition words. Remember, we talked about in the classroom, I have the 3 different, the 4 square with 3 different colors on green. These are words that you can use in the first and second box. Transition words like as well as, first, last, you know, that kind of thing. And then there's some that are you're using in the third box. It's kind of like last of all, or you know, things like that. And then there's some that you only use in the 4th box, and they're things like in summary or as you can see, or something like that. It just kind of wraps everything up, okay? So the only way that you can, the only thing you're going to do to improve this is to add one of those. You're going to add a kind of a a little transition word or phrase. And the other thing you're going to add to it is at the end. And at the end, you're just going to put a feeling statement of some kind. Now, I have put in also in your packet, I have put a sample. This is what I have done. I don't want you to copy this one, okay? But we're going to work at it together. And I'll show you what I did. So I started with the same thing you did. And my transition sentence is, or phrase, it's not really a sentence, as you can see. All right, I just added that to the front of this. As you can see, my favorite dessert is pie a la mode because I like the crust, the filling, and the ice cream. All right, so that's my introductory or my transition, the rest of the sentence, and then I just added a kind of a summary of how I feel about it on the last part of it. The dessert is yummy on a hot summer day, or this dessert is yummy on a hot summer day. That's kind of my feeling about it. All right, so if you were going to write a paragraph or an essay, you would have 5 different paragraphs, right? You'd have 3 sentences for your first paragraph. Then you'd have 4 sentences because you'd have your subtopic and your 3 details for your second paragraph. 4 sentences, which is the subtopic, 3 details for your third paragraph. The same for your fourth paragraph. And then your fifth paragraph would also have 3 sentences in it. It would, actually, it does not really 3 sentences because this first part isn't a sentence. But you would add 2 other things to this. Okay, so let's have you do it on your blank piece of paper. On your blank piece of paper, a transition word or words. Like I said, mine was as you can see. If you want to use that, you can, because some of the 4th square transition words are hard. You know, you can say last of all, or you can say hence. That's not a very common word for people your age, or something like that. But if you would like to use as you can see, you can use that. I want you to use something completely different for the last sentence, though. Okay, so you can say as you can see, and then write this whole thing. Do that here. Now remember, this is a paragraph. The first line is indented. All the other lines are out here. All right. Then after you have written as you can see in all of this, then think of a feeling sentence. I love hot fudge sundaes, or, I mean, it's not a hot fudge sundae, sorry, pie a la mode, or something that has to do with your feelings about it. All right. So that's all you're going to do for your writing today. Just this top paragraph. You're going to do something similar next week with this. But that's all we're doing today. We're doing we're working on a final paragraph of an essay. Okay. We're going to let's look real quickly before we start some other things with your reading. Let's look at our poem. It is called Little Charlie Chipmunk. And this is a fun poem because it's fun to say it as fast as you can and see if you can say it without getting tongue-tied. Little Charlie Chipmunk was a talker, mercy me. He chattered after breakfast and he chattered after tea. He chattered to his father and he chattered to his mother. He chattered to his sister and he chattered to his brother. He chattered till his family was almost driven wild. Oh, little Charlie Chipmunk was a very tiresome child. Okay, it's just kind of a fun poem about a really, really, really chatty chipmunk. Kind of known for that. They make lots and lots of noise. Okay, now, when you are reading a story or anything, it can be nonfiction, it can be a fiction. When you are reading, there are certain things that your brain automatically does that you don't even know it's doing to help you understand what you're reading. And this is called making connections. You can make connections in a couple of different ways. Actually, I want to talk about 3 different ways that you can make a connection, that your brain makes connections while you read. One of the ways that you make a connection is when you're reading and it reminds you of something that you have done. It reminds you of something else in your life that has happened, or that you have done, or that you have seen, or something like that, okay? This is called a text-to-self connection. Now, before I go further, let me show you. You're going to make a page, 2 pages, okay? And so let's go ahead and get set up, and then I'll finish. So in your packet, you have these. There are some with girls on them, some with boys on them. You can choose. You may use either the girls or the boys. You don't use both because that will be a repetition. So you choose either the boys or you use the girls. All right? You are going to, on one page of your composition book, after you cut your composition book page down, you're going to, of course, put the top up here. Glue it just like this. And then this is what I was just talking about. Find your box that says Text to Self. It has a picture of a little boy or a little girl and who's reading, and they're thinking to themselves, this reminds me of a time. And then you think of the time that it reminds you of. That's called text to self, because the text or the book that you're reading reminds you of something that you yourself have seen or done. Right? Down here, it says just what I said when I first started. It said making connections help us understand what we read. Like I said, your brain just does it, and you most of the time don't even know you've done it. Okay? Another way that you can make connections, or that your brain makes connections, is if you're reading a book and it reminds you of another book you've read. Maybe it has a similar character. Maybe something similar happened. Maybe it happens in the same place. Maybe some of the lessons were the same. But there's something about this book that is like another book that you have read. That's called text to text. You're comparing one book or text to another book or text. All right, and this is what I've written here, and you can write it too. This book reminds me of another book I've read. Okay, then the third way that your brain makes connections is by connecting with something that's going on in the world right now. Text to world. And I have a good example of that. I was just finished reading a book, and I started reading it quite a a while ago, and it is about uh, some people who are trying to figure out about a strange virus that is showing up and spreading around. And they're trying to figure out where it came from and how to find the cure for it. And this is just a story that I started reading before all this other stuff happened, all this pandemic. So I just thought, wow, that's where you can make a very easy connection between what you're reading and what's happening in the world. Okay, that's an example of that. This book reminds me of something in the world. Okay, so there's three things, three ways. There's lots of other ways, but these are three big ways that you are able to understand, that help you understand what you're reading, and to get everything together. Things remind you of stuff that you've done, things remind you of stuff you've read before, and things remind you of things that are going on in the world. So that's really an important way to learn. And like I said, even if you're reading a novel, just a fiction book, or if you're reading a nonfiction book, the more you read, the more experience you have, so it's easier to understand other things that perhaps you would not have understood if you hadn't read that stuff before. Okay? All right, so now we're thinking about On the Banks of Plum Creek. Okay, you've read the first part of it. And this is a really good picture, actually, of their first house underneath. It's a sod house, and it's underneath the ground. People can walk over it and not even know it's there. What do you think? How would you like living in a house like that? It's a lot different than what you're used to, isn't it? How did they think about the house? What did Laura think of it at first? What did Ma think about it at first? Why was this house a good place in the winter? Why was it a good place to live in the winter? Do you think it had bugs? That's kind of what I wondered. Did it have bugs? I mean, after all, it's under the ground. So, I had questions about that. And you might too. This is a good example of something new that you can hang a hook on. You can think about it, and then so the next time you read something about sod houses, well, you'll be able to say, oh, I remember reading a book that had a sod house in it. I know what that is. So that's making a connection, okay? So now, they didn't live in that house for long, did they? They just lived in it for the winter. And then Pa built a nice house, and he was kind of counting on a good wheat crop to be able to pay for everything. And so they got all settled in this nice house. What was it like? What was the house like? How did they get up into their bedroom where they slept? And then they had to go to school. It wasn't like nowadays where school was what's called compulsory. That means you have to go to school. Back in those days, you didn't have to go to school. Going to school was a great privilege, right? So Laura and Mary hadn't been to a school really before. Now their mama taught them. They were homeschooled just like you. So they knew how to read and do all that stuff, but they'd never really been in a school. Now tell me something. They walked 2.5 miles to school, and they walked 2.5 miles by themselves the first day to school. That's different, isn't it? Have you ever done that? 2.5 miles is a long way to walk to school, especially if you haven't never been there before. They'd never been into the town. They didn't know anything about it. And they were kind of afraid of it, weren't they? That was completely different from what they had ever known. They'd always been just their family, And then all of a sudden they have to walk 2.5 miles to get into a town that they weren't familiar with, and then they had to find a school, and everything was just real different, wasn't it? And the other thing, what do you think about the fact that Laura and Mary's mama pulled out 3 books, an arithmetic book, a spelling book, and a reading book, I think. 3 books. They didn't go to school and just have books given to them. They had to bring their own books to school if they were going to do anything. And since there was 2 girls and only 1 set of books, what do you think they did when they got there? They probably had to share, didn't they? So it was very, very different from what we do now, from what we have now. We're very fortunate. We have books, and we have schools close, and friends close, and it's very, very different. So one of the things you might think about while you're reading this book is think about all the different ways that your life is different. Think of some ways, some things that you might really be thankful for now that maybe Laura and Mary did not have. And that's a really good way to think of it. And think about things that they did that you wish, man, I wish I could have done that. That sounds like a lot of fun. So you can just think through things like that. But you are going to read another section of the book this week, and I hope you enjoy it. It's a good book. There's some funny things in it and some eye-opening things in it, and I hope you enjoy it. And I will see you next week. Bye.